Hey everyone, John here. And I got a bunch of messages saying that Everybody's Golf Hot Shots has been radically improved on Nintendo Switch. And I was hesitant. The game just came out. There's no way a patch fixed all its issues. And just as a refresher, the game was fixed at 30 FPS on both Switch 1 and Switch 2. And this is a big issue for a golf game because the gauge itself is 30 FPS, which it wasn't in previous Everybody's Golf games. Even in the 30 FPS versions, the gauge was always 60. So did they really fix anything with this update? Especially because prior, the Switch 1 version had a ton of performance issues. It was capped at 30, but it rarely ever hit 30. Whenever you hit the ball, it would plummet around 10 frames per second, and some weather conditions would keep the game constantly around 25 FPS and going even lower to the 10s. Could they have really fixed that in just a couple of days? Well, let's begin with Nintendo Switch 2, and would you look at this? Look at that gauge. Compare it to the prior gauge, the 1.1 gauge, and this is the 1.1.1 gauge. Look at that. This is definitely a 60 frames per second gauge. Bring up the frame rate graph! They have indeed uncapped the frame rate. Not only is the gauge 60 frames per second, but all of the gameplay is too. This is a radical improvement to the game. For those who maybe aren't aware why this is a big deal, when the game is 30 FPS, the window for making your shots is way smaller. Basically, the gauge is moving at practically half the speed, so your timing to make that work becomes much more difficult. But as you can see here, playing through these courses when it's sunny is a near flawless 60 frames per second. Every now and then there's a small dip, but never during actual gameplay. This is really good. Why did I say when it's sunny? Well, because when it's not sunny, you still do get dips. And now Switch 2 is running pretty much like PlayStation 5 does, so 60 frames per second most of the time, but when the weather's set for the first thing in the morning and things are kinda hazy, it goes down to around 45 frames per second. And I did test PlayStation 5 on the most recent patch as well, and that's not really been improved either. It still has a 120Hz mode, and still does not come close to 120 FPS, and that hazy weather is still making the frame rate go really far down to the mid-40s. So, have they actually improved anything? They've uncapped the frame rate, but the problems still persist. In the Switch version, whenever you hit the ball and you get that picture-in-picture, it's still very blurry compared to PlayStation 5. All the same problems still appear to be there, only at 60 FPS most of the time now, making it much more playable. Which makes me wonder, how does this run on Switch 1 now? Because if you go in the graphics settings, there's no toggle for the frame rate, it's just at 60 FPS now. The plural graphics option still has a singular option in its dynamic resolution scaling, which I kept on for these comparisons. So let's go to Switch 1 a moment. How is this faring? And the answer is worse. They made the Switch 1 version worse to make the Switch 2 version better. So now Switch 1 runs completely unlocked. It can never hit 60 frames per second. It can sometimes hit high 40s if the camera angle's being nice, but during actual gameplay you're mostly looking at around 35 frames per second, dipping between around that number and somewhere in the 40s, sometimes lower, which is not ideal. The 30 FPS cap was better than this because now you have a very inconsistent timing frame to try and match. It's constantly changing how quickly that gauge is moving, and it's really hard to react, far harder than it used to be. So they did make the Switch 2 version better, which is still a Switch 1 game just running in backwards compatibility, by making the base Switch 1 far worse. This could have been easily remedied with just a 30 FPS toggle in the options, but that does not exist for some reason. It does in Claphands' Easy Come Easy Golf. They added a toggle for Switch 1 and Switch 2 to enjoy the game, but yeah, this just sabotages the original Switch 1 version, and all those problem areas that it used to have are still there. So whenever you hit the ball, you will still get a plummet in the frame rate, and those hazy weather sections are still just as atrocious as they used to be. So is Everybody's Golf Hot Shots better now on the Switch? Well, if you're playing on Switch 2, yes, this is actually quite a nice way to play the game now. I'd highly recommend it. And as I said in my previous video, for me, Everybody's Golf has long been a portable franchise. I love playing this on PlayStation Vita, love playing it on PSP, and I get to relive those memories on the Switch now, and that's absolutely awesome. Still has its problem areas. You can avoid them for the most part if you change the weather to not be the problem ones like the early morning haze, which just makes you wonder why they shipped it like that. Like, if the feature breaks the game that much, don't include the feature. Very strange. A standard native Switch 2 edition would also be greatly appreciated to really get the most of that horsepower, but it's most likely the case that this developer doesn't have dev kits, even though Bandai Namco or parts of Bandai Namco do. This is still a bit of a ultra mixed bag. Everybody's Golf Hotshots is better on Switch 2 than it used to be. I can actually recommend playing it on Switch 2 now. It has the exact same faults as PlayStation 5 has. It dips in the same areas. But this game still needs a lot more love in the patches to come. Hopefully the developer can do something, because so far they've just unlocked the frame rate, really. Hopefully some actual game logic updates are gonna come down the line. But yeah, it is better. Thank you for watching, everybody, and let me know what you think. Catch you next time. Bye.